There was a time when parts of rural Tanzania looked almost abandoned. Dry wind, dust where crops used to be. Families watching their land fade a little more every season. But the turning point didn't come from a foreign project or a rescue mission. It came from the farmers themselves. Quiet experiments, small changes, old techniques brought back to life. And little by little, the soil responded. What started as survival slowly became a transformation no one expected. This is how they brought green back to land everyone else had written off. October 12, 1985. Dodoma region, central Tanzania. The wind carries only dust. Juma Mwalimu stands in what used to be his father's maize field, and the soil crumbles in his hands like ash. Around him, the land stretches in every direction. Brown, cracked, hostile. The sun beats down without mercy. There are no clouds. There haven't been clouds that mattered in 3 years. His children haven't eaten a full meal in 2 weeks. This is what desperation looks like. Not the kind you see in news reports with sad music and slow-motion footage. The real kind. The kind where a man stares at the earth that's supposed to feed his family and sees only betrayal. But here's what the cameras never showed you. Here's what the aid agencies never understood. This wasn't natural. This wasn't just drought. When the British left Tanzania in 1961, they didn't just pack up their colonial administration and go home. They left behind something more insidious, the completely restructured agricultural system designed to extract, not sustain. They'd spent decades forcing farmers to abandon the irrigation techniques their ancestors had perfected over centuries. Modernize, they said. Use our methods, buy our equipment, depend on our expertise. The traditional systems, the ones that had sustained communities through countless dry seasons, were dismissed as primitive, backward, inefficient. And when those traditional systems disappeared, when that knowledge was buried under the weight of colonial condescension, the land began to die. By the mid-1980s, Tanzania was caught in a vicious cycle. Failed rains meant failed harvests. Failed harvests meant dependency on foreign aid. Foreign aid came with conditions, with experts who flew in from Washington and London with solutions that worked beautifully on paper and failed catastrophically in the field. Juma watches a UN truck rumble past on the distant road, kicking up more dust. It's the third one this month. Inside are sacks of grain, emergency rations to keep people alive until the next harvest that probably won't come. He's tired of waiting, tired of watching foreign consultants in clean shirts gesture at the land like it's a problem to be solved with the right PowerPoint presentation. Tired of being told that salvation will come from somewhere else, someone else, anyone else, but the people who actually work the soil. His neighbor, Makala, approaches from the adjacent plot. She's 63 years old, and her hands are rough from decades of fighting with the earth, but her eyes are sharp. She's been thinking. Your grandfather, she says, not as a question, but as a memory. He never lost a harvest, even in the worst droughts. Juma knows this. Everyone knows this. The old people talk about it sometimes, careful, like they're discussing something forbidden. Before the British came, before the modernization, before the dependency, when the community managed water the way their ancestors had taught them, when they understood that in this climate, Survival wasn't about fighting nature, it was about working with it. The furrows, Makala continues. She points to the barely visible depressions in the landscape, ancient channels now filled with dirt and forgotten. They are still there, under all this, the old systems. They didn't disappear, we just stopped using them. Something shifts in Juma's chest. It's not hope, not yet. It's something smaller, but more dangerous. It's possibility. That evening, in a small church hall in Dodoma, 23 farmers gather. They are not officials. They are not waiting for permission from the Ministry of Agriculture or approval from international donors. They are just people who've decided that waiting is another word for dying. One spreads a hand-drawn map on a wooden table. It shows the water systems their grandparents once maintained. Seasonal streams, natural aquifers, the invisible network that once kept this region alive. Another farmer produces a worn notebook passed down from his father. Inside are sketches, measurements, techniques written in Swahili describing how to read the land, how to direct water, how to prepare soil for the rains that might not come. This is where it begins. Not with foreign experts or international conferences or development grants. It begins here, in this room, with people who've been told for generations that they don't have the answers. They're about to prove everyone wrong. Because what happens next in Tanzania doesn't just change these farms. It doesn't just transform this region. It rewrites what Africa is capable of when it stops asking for permission and starts trusting itself. The meeting in the church hall doesn't end with applause or revolutionary speeches. It ends with a question that hangs in the air like smoke. Who actually remembers how to do this? Because here's the thing about erasing knowledge. It doesn't disappear completely. It goes underground. It lives in the memories of grandmothers who nobody asks anymore. It survives in the muscle memory of old men who learned from their fathers before development experts arrived to tell them they were doing everything wrong. Makala knows someone. 3 days later, she returns with Mzee Hamisi. He's 78 years old, walks with a carved stick, and has hands that look like the land itself, weathered, cracked, but unbreakably strong. When he was a boy, before independence, his father ran one of the largest traditional irrigation cooperatives in the region, fed 3 villages, never failed. The British shut it down in 1954, called it inefficient use of water resources. They had plans for a modern dam that was supposed to solve everything. The dam was never built, but Mzee Hamisi's father kept teaching him anyway, in secret, like passing down contraband. They can take our systems, his father told him, but they can't take what we know, not unless we let them. In the church hall, Mzee Hamisi kneels beside the hand-drawn map and begins to speak. His voice is quiet but certain. "You are thinking about this wrong," he says. "You want to bring water to the crops. That's the European way. Force nature to do what you want." He traces his finger along the old channels on the map. "Our way is different. You work with what the land gives you. You store it when it comes. You move it where it's needed. You never fight the earth. You listen to it." He explains the mifereji, small-scale furrow systems that catch rainfall and seasonal floods, directing them into shallow reservoirs lined with clay and indigenous grasses. He describes the mituta, terraced planting that prevents erosion and creates microclimates where moisture lingers.
He talks about the timing, reading the wind and the behavior of certain birds to predict rain patterns weeks in advance. This isn't folklore. This is engineering. Sophisticated, adaptive, perfected over generations by people who understood that in East Africa, water isn't abundant, it's precious. And you don't waste what's precious. Juma listens and something clicks into place. This isn't about romanticizing the past. It's about recognizing that the solutions they've been importing, the ones designed for European rainfall and American-scale irrigation, were never built for this land. They were built to make Tanzania dependent. But dependency is a choice, and they're choosing something else. Within 2 weeks, the group grows to 47 farmers. They call themselves Umoja wa Maji, the Water Unity. Not a government program, not an NGO project, a cooperative owned and run entirely by the people who work the land. They pool their resources, not money, because none of them have money. They pool labor, knowledge, tools, and time. Every farmer commits to working on the collective irrigation project 2 days a week. In return, everyone's land gets access to the system. The Ministry of Agriculture hears about it and sends someone to investigate. A young official with a degree from an American university arrives in a Land Rover carrying folders full of feasibility studies. He tells them their plan won't work. The water table is too low. They don't have proper equipment. They haven't filed environmental impact assessment. They need to wait for the next development cycle, apply for funding, hire consultants. Makala listens politely. Then she asks him a question. When was the last time you grew food with your own hands? He doesn't have an answer. They start digging the next morning. The first furrow takes 6 days. It's 3 kilometers long, running from a seasonal stream bed to a cluster of 11 farms. They dig by hand, following the contours Mzee Hamisi marks with wooden stakes. The angle has to be precise. Too steep, and the water rushes through too fast, eroding everything. Too shallow, and it stagnates, breeds mosquitoes, becomes useless. Mzee Hamisi learned this geometry from his father, who learned it from his father. No calculators, no engineering software, just knowledge passed down through generations who understood that getting this wrong meant death. They lined the furrow with a mixture of clay and cow dung, materials that cost nothing but work perfectly to prevent seepage. At intervals, they built small stone weirs that slow the water flow and allow sediment to settle, naturally filtering the system. When the first rains come in November, light but steady, the water moves exactly as Mzee Hamisi promised it would move. It flows into the furrow, spreads into the collection basin, seeps into the soil around the planted fields. For the first time in 3 years, the earth in Juma's field stayed moist for more than 2 days after rainfall. It's not magic. It's not a miracle. It's just people remembering how to work with the land instead of against it. Word spreads fast. Farmers from neighboring villages arrive to watch, skeptical at first. They've seen too many failed projects, too many promised solutions that dissolved like morning mist. But this is different. This is working. By January 1986, 5 more cooperatives have formed across Dodoma region. Each one adapts the traditional techniques to their specific landscape. Some use underground stone channels, others build terraced catchments, some revive ancient spring systems that colonial administrators had declared depleted. None of them ask for foreign aid. None of them wait for development approval. They just start rebuilding what was taken from them. And the land responds. Because here's what decades of foreign experts never understood. African farmers are struggling because they lack knowledge. They are struggling because they were forced to abandon the knowledge that actually worked, replaced with systems designed for someone else's climate, someone else's soil, someone else's profit margins. Tanzania is about to show the world what happens when African innovation stops apologizing for not looking Western enough. When people trust themselves more than they trust the next development report.
March 1986. The sun rises over Dodoma, and for the first time in years, the landscape isn't just brown. There are patches of green now, small ones, scattered across what used to be dead earth. They are not lush, they are not dramatic, but they are alive, and that means everything. Juma kneels beside a row of young maize plants, their leaves bright against the soil. He runs his hand over them gently, like touching something sacred, because in a way, it is. These plants represent something more than food. They represent the possibility that maybe, just maybe, they don't need saving from the outside. Maybe they can save themselves. But success brings new problems, problems the old knowledge didn't anticipate. The traditional mifereji systems work beautifully when communities were smaller, when population density was different, when climate patterns were more predictable. But Tanzania in 1986 isn't Tanzania in 1886. There are more people, more farms, more demand on every drop of water. And the droughts, they are lasting longer now, hitting harder, following patterns that even Mzee Hamisi's lifetime of experience can't always predict. The question becomes, how do you honor the wisdom of the past while adapting to the reality of the present? This is where the real innovation begins. At a cooperative meeting in April, a farmer named Daudi Kimario stands up with a problem. His fields are at the end of the irrigation line, which means by the time water reaches him, there's barely enough left. The traditional system distributed water fairly when communities were smaller. But with 47 families now connected to the network, the math doesn't work anymore. We need rotation, someone suggests. Each section gets water on different days. That's not enough, Daudi counters. We need storage, real storage, something that holds water through the entire dry season, not just a few weeks. The room goes quiet. Traditional systems used shallow collection basins, effective but limited. What Daudi is describing requires something bigger, something that combines old knowledge with new thinking. Mzee Hamisi leans forward. My father once told me about the Rikombe, deep storage pits lined with layers of clay, ash, and plant fibers. They built them near the old trade routes, places where caravans needed reliable water. Some of those pits stayed full through entire dry seasons. How deep? Juma asks. Deep enough that a man standing in one couldn't see over the edge. That's when Maria Mtumwa speaks up. She's a teacher, 32 years old, one of the few in the cooperative with formal education. She's been quiet until now, listening, learning, but she has an idea. At the school in Dar es Salaam, they taught us about modern reservoir engineering. She says carefully, aware that modern is almost a dirty word in this room. But what if we combine that with the Vikombe design? Use the traditional lining methods, but engineer the shape to maximize volume and minimize evaporation. The best of both. The skepticism. Some of the older farmers worry that bringing in outside techniques will corrupt what they are building, that it's the beginning of a slide back towards dependency. But Makala, who's become something of a moral center for the group, asks the question that matters. Does it keep our people fed? Does it keep us independent? Or does it make us wait for someone else's approval? They decide to try it. Over the next 3 months, they excavate the first hybrid reservoir. 15 feet deep, 40 feet across, shaped using calculations Maria brings from her teaching books, but lined using the exact methods Mzee Hamis's father taught him. Clay, mixed with cow dung and crushed termite mound soil, applied in layers, each one dried and tested before the next goes on. They engineer a multi-level inlet system, so incoming water can be controlled depending on rainfall intensity. They plant indigenous reeds around the edges, not for decoration, but because those specific plants stabilize soil, reduce evaporation, and attract insects that prey on mosquito larvae. Every detail is intentional. Every choice is tested. When the April rains come, heavy and sudden, the reservoir fills in 3 days. The water is clean, cool, protected from the sun by a shade structure made from local timber and woven grass. It's not cement. It's not imported technology, but it works. By June, that water is irrigating 23 farms through the driest weeks of the year. Crops that would have withered are thriving. Families that would have been lining up for food aid are eating from their own harvest. The innovation spreads like wildfire. A cooperative in Singida develops a modified version of traditional contour planting, using GPS coordinates borrowed from a surveyor in town to map micro-elevations with precision the ancestors never had. They achieve the same water-smart terracing the old systems provided, but scaled up to serve 3 times as many farms. In Tabora, farmers revive the ancient practice of mazao za machanganyiko, intercropping specific plant combinations that support each other's water needs. But they add new crops into the rotation based on nutritional research, creating fields that are more resilient and more nourishing than anything grown before. None of this is pure tradition. None of this is pure modernity. It's something else. Something uniquely Tanzanian. Something that refuses to choose between honoring the past and embracing the future. It's innovation on their own terms. And the foreign experts? They are baffled. A team from USAID visits in August, sent to assess why certain regions are suddenly showing improved agricultural output without any documented foreign assistance. They arrive expecting to find some new NGO project they haven't heard about. Instead, they find farmers who politely decline their offers of help. "We appreciate your interest," Juma tells them, standing in a field of healthy sorghum that shouldn't exist according to their models. "We appreciate your interest, but we've got this." The lead consultant, a man named Richard, who's worked in developing nations for 15 years, can't hide his confusion. "But you don't have mechanized equipment. You don't have chemical fertilizers. You don't have certified seed stock." Makala, standing nearby, allows herself a small smile. "That's correct," she says. "We don't." "Then how?" She interrupts gently. "We have something better. We have knowledge, our knowledge, and we have each other." Richard leaves without understanding. His report will say the improvements are modest and likely unsustainable. His agency will recommend a proper development intervention before the farmers regress to traditional methods. But he's already missed the point entirely. This isn't a regression. This is a revolution. just not the kind that comes with a press release and a ribbon-cutting ceremony. By the end of 1986, 73 irrigation cooperatives are operating across central Tanzania. Some succeed wildly. Some fail and have to be redesigned. Some struggle but persist. All of them learn from each other, share techniques, adapt solutions to local conditions. No one is in charge. No one needs to be. They are governed by something more powerful than hierarchy, mutual need and shared purpose. And slowly, furrow by furrow, reservoir by reservoir, harvest by harvest, the desert begins to remember what it used to be, what it always could have been if people had been trusted to save themselves.
February 1987, Dodoma region. The change isn't dramatic enough for satellite photos. It won't make the evening news in London or New York. But if you're standing in the middle of it, if you've lived through the years of dust and hunger and waiting for rain that never comes, it feels like witnessing a resurrection. The fields are green. Not everywhere, not perfectly, but green in a way that matters. Green that means children eating. Green that means families staying instead of migrating to the cities in desperation. Green that means dignity. Juma's youngest daughter, Asha, is 6 years old. This is the first harvest season she'll remember where there's actually something to harvest. She doesn't know what it means yet, doesn't understand that the maize her mother is cooking came from soil that was supposed to be dead. She just knows she isn't hungry. That's the revolution right there. In a bowl of ugali made from grain grown in earth that foreign experts said couldn't support crops without massive intervention. But the real breakthrough isn't the food itself. It's what the food represents. Independence. By mid-1987, the Umoja wa Maji network has expanded to include 147 cooperatives across 5 regions. They've developed an informal communication system, messengers on bicycles and buses, carrying handwritten notes, sharing what works and what doesn't. When a cooperative in Maniara discovers that a specific mixture of compost and biochar dramatically improves water retention, the technique spreads to Singida within a month. When farmers in Shinyanga perfect a method for protecting reservoirs from elephant damage using beehive fencing, a traditional technique modernized with better hive construction, the innovation reaches Dodoma within weeks. This is knowledge moving at the speed of trust. No peer review process, no grant applications, no waiting for approval from people who've never felt this soil under their fingernails. Just farmers talking to farmers, problem solvers sharing solutions, communities refusing to fail alone. And the numbers start to tell a story that's impossible to ignore. In the Dodoma cooperatives, average crop yields increased by 47% in the first full growing season. Not because of chemical fertilizers or imported seed varieties, because water is finally going where it needs to go, when it needs to go there, using systems designed for this specific land. Malnutrition rates among children in cooperative communities drop by 32%. Migration to urban slums slows, then reverses in some areas. Young people who left their villages for Dar es Salaam start coming back, realizing there might actually be a future in farming if you can trust the land to feed you. But here's what really gets people's attention. The cooperatives start producing surplus. For the first time in years, farmers aren't just surviving, they are thriving enough to sell. Local markets that were dependent on imported grain start stocking locally grown maize, sorghum, millet, vegetables.
The prices are competitive, the quality is high, and every shilling spent stays in Tanzania. This catches the eye of Hassan Winnie, a regional agricultural officer who spent his entire career watching foreign aid programs fail. He's skeptical by nature, seeing too many miracles turn to dust, but the data coming out of these cooperatives doesn't lie. In April, he drives out to meet with Juma and the other cooperative leaders. He doesn't arrive with solutions or criticisms. He arrives with a question. What do you need? It's the first time anyone from the government has asked them that without attaching conditions to the answer. The cooperative leaders look at each other. They've learned to be suspicious of help, even well-meaning help. But Hassan seems genuine. More importantly, he seems to understand that they are not looking for someone to save them, they are looking for someone to get out of their way. Recognition, Makala says finally. Recognition, legal recognition. Right now, we're operating in a gray area. We can't access credit. We can't negotiate with larger buyers. We can't protect our water rights when commercial farms try to tap into our systems. We don't need your money. We need you to acknowledge that what we are doing is legitimate. Hassan takes notes. He doesn't make promises. But 2 months later, something unprecedented happens. The Tanzanian government officially recognizes the Umoja wa Maji network as a legitimate agricultural cooperative system. They are granted water rights. They are given the same legal standing as government-run agricultural projects. Most importantly, they maintain complete autonomy. No government oversight, no mandatory compliance with foreign development models, no strings attached. It's not charity, it's respect. And it changes everything. With legal recognition comes credibility. Local banks, previously unwilling to work with informal farmer groups, start offering microloans using future harvests as collateral. The cooperatives don't need much. Small amounts for better tools, seeds for crop diversification, materials for expanding irrigation networks. But access to capital, even modest capital, accelerates what they are building. By September 1987, the cooperatives are feeding an estimated 37,000 people directly, just from the work of farmers who are told they needed saving. International observers finally pay attention, but not in the way you'd expect. A team from the World Bank arrives in November, sent to investigate what they are calling the Dodoma anomaly, unexplained agricultural improvement in a region classified as high risk for chronic food insecurity. They come with assumptions about what they'll find. Hidden subsidies, probably. Unreported foreign aid. Some explanation that fits their models. But what they find instead breaks their models. They interview farmers who patiently explain traditional irrigation techniques refined over generations. They examine reservoirs that cost almost nothing to build, but perform as well as engineered systems costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. They review yield data that shouldn't be possible given the official rainfall records. The lead economist, a woman named Dr. Patricia Hammond, sits in Juma's field and asks the question that's been bothering her since she arrived. Why didn't you wait for us, for proper development assistance? Juma considers this. He's gotten better at talking to outsiders over the past 2 years, learned how to explain what they are doing without sounding defensive or apologetic. Because waiting is dying slowly, and we were tired of dying. Dr. Hammond includes this quote in her report, but what she doesn't include, what she can't quite bring herself to write, is the larger implication that maybe the entire foreign aid model is built on a lie. The lie that African farmers need Western expertise to save them from their own ignorance. The truth is more uncomfortable. The truth is that African farmers know exactly what they are doing. They've known for centuries. They just got interrupted by colonialism, exploited by cash crop economics, and then patronized by development agencies convinced that the only valid knowledge is the kind that comes with a degree from Oxford or MIT.
Tanzania is proving something dangerous to the entire aid industrial complex, that African solutions to African problems might actually be better than imported ones. That self-determination is not just a political slogan, it's a practical agricultural strategy. And once people realize that, once that idea takes root, it's going to grow like those crops pushing through the formerly dead soil. Unstoppable, undeniable, alive.
January 1989. 3 years since that first meeting in the church hall. The landscape has changed in ways that defy simple measurement. Yes, there are statistics, crop yields, water tables, nutrition rates. But stand on a hillside outside Dodoma at sunrise. Look across the valley, and what you see can't be captured in numbers. The terraced fields catching the early light. The network of irrigation channels threading through once barren land like veins carrying life. The morning sounds of a community that's no longer on the edge of survival, but firmly in the territory of something else. Possibility. The transformation isn't just agricultural. It's psychological, economic, political. It's the way people walk now, shoulders a little straighter. The way they talk about the future without that hollow uncertainty that comes from depending on forces beyond your control. By 1989, the Umoja wa Maji network includes over 300 cooperatives spanning 7 regions. They are feeding an estimated 120,000 people. But the numbers, as impressive as they are, still don't tell the whole story. Here's what the numbers don't show. A 17-year-old girl named Nima, who stays in school because her family's farm is finally producing enough that they don't need her labor every single day. She wants to study agricultural science, not to learn how farming works. She already knows that, learnt it from her parents and grandparents. She wants to study it so she can document it, formalize it, prove to the world that what her community is doing isn't luck or accident, but sophisticated environmental management that deserves academic recognition. A 53-year-old man named Bakari, who spent 15 years working in Dar es Salaam factories, sending money home, who's now returned to his village because farming is actually viable again. He brought back skills too. Basic accounting, inventory management, negotiation tactics learned in the city. Now he helps his cooperative market their surplus, negotiate fair prices, resist being exploited by middlemen. A grandmother named Aziza, who's teaching her grandchildren the irrigation techniques her own grandmother taught her, but with modifications. This is the old way, she tells them, showing them how to read the land. And this is the new way, showing them how to measure and adjust. Together, they are our way. This is what transformation looks like on the ground. Not just crops growing, but culture evolving. Not just water flowing, but knowledge compounding across generations. And the economic impact is starting to ripple outward in ways even the cooperatives didn't anticipate. In March 1989, representatives from 4 cooperatives in Dodoma and Singida form what they call the Biashara za Wakulima, the Farmers Trading Association. They pool their surplus production and negotiate directly with buyers in Dar es Salaam, cutting out the exploitative middlemen who've been underpaying them for years. Their first contract is for 60 metric tons of maize and sorghum to supply urban markets. They deliver on time, high quality, at prices that are fair to both farmers and consumers. The buyers are impressed. More importantly, they are surprised.
There's this unconscious assumption that rural cooperatives can't handle large-scale commerce, that they need capacity building from foreign consultants. The cooperatives prove otherwise. They've built capacity themselves. They've learned by doing, failed when they needed to, adapted, improved. Within 6 months, the trading association is handling contracts worth hundreds of thousands of shillings monthly. The profit margins are small but consistent, and every single shilling flows back to the farmers who did the work. This is economic self-determination, not as a slogan, but as a functioning reality.
(1995). 6 years after the court victory, 10 years since that first furrow was dug. A delegation from Kenya arrives in Dodoma. They've heard stories, rumors really, about Tanzanian farmers doing something impossible, transforming arid land without massive foreign investment, building food security from the ground up. They are skeptical, but desperate enough to investigate. Their leader is a woman named Wanjiru, a farmer from a drought-prone region near Machakos. She spent years watching aid trucks arrive with emergency rations, watching her neighbors line up for food that comes with condescension disguised as compassion. She's tired of it. She wants something different. Makala, now in her 70s, but still sharp as ever, walks Wanjiru through the irrigation network, shows her the reservoirs, the terraced fields, the crop rotations, explains the history, how they started with nothing but desperation and half-remembered knowledge, how they combined old techniques with new thinking, how they refused to wait for permission. Wanjiru stops at one of the original reservoirs, the hybrid design that Mariam Tumwa helped engineer back in 1986. It's still functioning perfectly, still feeding dozens of farms through the dry season. How much did this cost? In money? Almost nothing. In labor? Everything. But the labor was ours. We own it. That's the key insight right there. That's what decades of foreign aid never understood. Ownership isn't just about property rights. It's about agency. It's about being the author of your own solutions, rather than the recipient of someone else's charity. It's about building something with your own hands, so when it works, you know you can do it again. And when it fails, you know how to fix it. Wanjiru returned to Kenya with detailed notes, sketches, seeds from crops adapted to similar climates. Within a year, the first Kenyan cooperative forms using Tanzanian techniques adapted to their specific conditions. Then another, then 10 more. The knowledge spreads like water through soil, finding channels, moving organically, nourishing everything it touches. By 2000, variations of the Tanzanian model are operating in Uganda, Malawi, parts of Ethiopia. Each adaptation is unique, fitted to local landscapes and cultural practices, but they all share the core principle: trust the people who work the land, support their innovation, get out of their way. International development agencies are forced to reckon with what is happening. Some adapt their approaches, genuinely learning from the Tanzanian experience. Others dismiss it as anecdotal or not scalable, the favorite terms for rejecting evidence that contradicts their institutional assumptions. But the evidence keeps mounting. A comprehensive study in 2003 by the University of Dar es Salaam documents the long-term impacts of the cooperative irrigation movement. The findings are striking. Regions with active cooperatives show 43% higher food security than comparable regions relying on conventional development aid. Child mortality rates are 31% lower. School attendance is 27% higher. Migration to urban slums is 48% lower. And here's the number that really matters. The cost per person fed through cooperative irrigation is less than 1/10 the cost of traditional food aid programs. 1/10. For a fraction of what the international community spent trying to develop African agriculture, Tanzanian farmers developed themselves, fed themselves, built thriving communities, created economic opportunities, preserved cultural knowledge while innovating for the future. The study's conclusion is diplomatically worded, but the implication is clear. Maybe the development industry has been solving the wrong problem. Maybe African farmers don't need to be modernized. Maybe they need to be trusted, supported, and then left alone to do what they've always been capable of. But the legacy of Tanzania's Green Revolution goes deeper than policy reports and academic studies. In 2007, Nima, remember her? The 17-year-old who wanted to study agricultural science, completes her PhD. Her dissertation documents the traditional ecological knowledge embedded in East African irrigation systems, demonstrating that what colonial authorities dismissed as primitive was actually sophisticated environmental management refined over centuries. Her work is published internationally. It's cited in agricultural programs across Africa. It becomes required reading in development studies courses at universities in Europe and America. The knowledge that was nearly erased is now being recognized as valuable. Not quaint, not historical curiosity, valuable, applicable, essential. Bakari, the man who returned from the city, now runs a training program teaching urban youth about sustainable agriculture. Young people who grew up thinking farming was backward, a sign of failure, are learning that it can be innovative, dignified, profitable. He shows them the irrigation networks, the water management systems, the cooperative economics. He tells them, this is technology. It might not look like a smartphone, but it's just as sophisticated. More importantly, actually, because you can't eat a smartphone. Some of them laugh. Some of them start to understand. A few of them stay, joining cooperatives, bringing their urban skills into rural contexts, creating hybrid approaches that neither their grandparents nor their city friends would have imagined. And Aziza? She is 93 now, still teaching her grandchildren and great-grandchildren how to read the land. She tells them stories about when the earth was dead, when people went hungry, when everyone said they needed outside help to survive. But we didn't. We had everything we needed right here. We just had to remember it, had to believe in it. That's the lesson Tanzania offers to the rest of Africa, to the rest of the world. You are not broken. Your knowledge is not insufficient. Your methods are not backward. You have been told lies about your own capacity for generations, but lies don't become truth just because they are repeated by people with degrees and funding. What Tanzania proved is that when people are given space to trust themselves, to honor their knowledge while adapting to new challenges, to build solutions that actually fit their land and their lives, extraordinary things become possible. The green revolution Tanzania needed wasn't going to come from foreign experts with pre-packaged solutions. It was going to come from Tanzanian farmers who understood their soil, their water, their climate in ways no outsider ever could. All they needed was permission to trust themselves. They didn't wait for that permission. They took it. And in taking it, they transformed not just their fields, but their future. Today, the Umoja wa Maji network includes over 800 cooperatives. They feed millions. They've become a model studied worldwide. International delegations visit regularly, looking for lessons they can take home. But the most important lesson isn't technical. It's not about furrow angles or reservoir designs or crop rotation schedules. The lesson is this: African innovation is real. African knowledge is valid. African solutions to African problems are not just adequate, they are often superior to imported alternatives. And when Africa stops asking for permission and starts trusting itself, there's no limit to what becomes possible. If this story moved you, if it changed how you see African innovation and resilience, do us a favor. Hit that like button. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts. We read every single one. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. The full story with additional details, sources, and historical context is available on our blog. Link is in the description below. And here's the thing. We are just getting started. There are dozens more stories like this. Hundreds of moments when African nations proved their genius, their strength, their capacity to shape their own destiny. Stories that were buried, forgotten, or deliberately ignored. But we are bringing them back. We are rewriting the narrative. We are showing the world what Rise of African Nations is all about. Truth, power, and the brilliance that's always been here. So subscribe, hit that notification bell, show your support, because every subscription tells us that you want more of this, that you are tired of the old stories and ready for the real ones. This is how we change the narrative. Together, one story at a time. Until the next one, stay curious, stay proud, and remember, Africa has always known how to rise. We are just making sure the world finally pays attention.